Hello, this is Jennifer Parrish, Superintendent of Poquoson City Public Schools. I'd like to share with you my proposed budget for fiscal year 16. I'd like to remind everybody that during our budget development, we had three main objectives. These are the same objectives that we've used for the past 6 years in our budget development. First, we wanted to ensure that we protect instructional programs as much as possible. We also wanted to ensure as few staff members as possible are unemployed as a result of budget cuts. And finally, we like to provide some form of additional compensation for all our employees. I'd like to provide you some background information of what we've been doing from fiscal year 10 through fiscal year 15, which is our current school year. During the past 6 budget cycles, we've made almost $5 million in cuts. And those $5 million in cuts came out of what was originally a $22.5 million budget. As you can see, our cuts were deep. We eliminated 50.5 positions. That represents 18% of our current workforce. And while we have been decreasing in enrollment, we've cut well beyond our enrollment loss. As you see here in the area of teaching, we've cut 10 teaching positions beyond enrollment loss. In other words, we should have those 10 teaching positions in our budget now, but are unable to do so. Also, during 3 of the past 6 budget cycles, employees have lost their jobs as a result of budget cuts. We've greatly altered our employee health insurance benefits. We went from 4 plans to 2 plans, with one of those plans being a high deductible plan. We also have adjusted co-payments. And in fiscal year 12 and fiscal year 13, we eliminated 3 instructional programs, 2 at the high school and 1 at the middle school. And we've had to greatly reduce some other of our instructional programs. The main reason for all of this cutting is a result of how the state has funded us for the last 6 years and currently does. The state cut $2.1 million in its share of the standards of quality. The standards of quality, or SOQs, are what drive what we do in schools. It's the minimum requirement that we face each year. Our school division, like school divisions across the state, go well beyond the minimum requirement. Realize that the SOQs allow for us to have 29 students in a kindergarten classroom. That just does not make sense instructionally, so we obviously have more teachers than are required at the kindergarten level. That's just one example of how we staff beyond the SOQs. Now, this $2.1 million cut represents 25% of our current state funding. Imagine if we even had just $1 million of that back in our budget. It's very important to note that the standards of quality funding reduction has nothing to do with our decrease in enrollment. We've lost funding because of the decrease in enrollment, but we also have lost funding in areas such as the standards of quality because the state has simply made reductions in its funding of public education. While making those reductions, they've increased the number of mandates that we face. So we've had to implement new programs and new regulations despite the fact that we've lost funding from the state. As you see here, our percentage of the general fund of the state's budget has been reduced from 35% to below 30%. Clearly, K-12 public education is just not the priority it once was for our state elected officials. Additionally, the state per pupil funding has dropped by $800 on average. Imagine if we had $800 more per student, what we could do. Our local story is a very different story. From fiscal year 11 through fiscal year 14, we've received over $641,000 from the city of Poquoson. Coming into fiscal year 15, we received an additional $450,000. This represented 3 cents of a 10-cent tax increase. You see here where these monies went. They went in part to support a 1% raise for our employees in fiscal year 12. And then the fall of fiscal year 12, we were able to provide a one-time bonus, but had to move that funding for fiscal year 13 into saving teaching positions. It helped to cover an unfunded portion of a 2% state raise and helped us with the VRS employee switch in fiscal year 14. And the $450,000 that we received for this school year was used in its entirety to save positions. Otherwise, we would have had to cut almost another $500,000 worth of positions in our budget. As you look up above, you can see that our employees have received only a total of a 3% raise over the past 5 years. I'd like to briefly talk about the enrollment decrease because it does have an impact on our budget and likely may do so in the future unless something changes. You see here what our actual enrollment was for September 30th of a number of years. Our highest enrollment was in the year 2006. We had 2,602 students. Through September 30th of 2014, that's this school year, our enrollment has decreased by almost 500 students. Now, we did see an anomaly this year. Between September 30th and January 12th of this year, we did have 18 additional students enroll. So we still have suffered an enrollment decrease from last year, but it is smaller than we anticipated. Because we saw that increase, we did some new projections of our enrollment, and we went to the Weldon Cooper Center, which does demographics for the state, for assistance. Based on the data that we've received, we're projecting only a loss of 5 students into fiscal year 16. But I stress, this is still another loss of students. We would be helped very much if we had more students enroll in our school division, and as you can see, we have plenty of room for them. Now let's talk about what the numbers mean for us in terms of dollars. You see here, because we're projecting a loss of only 5 students, that our enrollment loss in terms of revenue from the state is $20,000. We get approximately $4,000 per student from the state. Our VRS rate change has occurred because of the voting by the General Assembly. The General Assembly's budget has the rate change for VRS going from 14.5% to 14.06%. We're anticipating the governor approving the General Assembly's budget. That represents a loss for us of $26,680. In another slide, I'll talk about how we actually recoup that funding. So what you see here is a total state revenue loss of $46,680. Now, this is far less than what I've talked about in recent years. But what I had hoped we'd see this year was an increase in state funding to offset the loss of millions of dollars that we've experienced from the state in recent years, and the billions of dollars that the state has reduced for funding for public K-12 education. We do see some projected costs increase. Again, we've been fortunate this year with regard to our health insurance. We're anticipating only a 3.5% increase in health insurance costs, and the school division will be covering that increase. The dental insurance rate held steady, so what you see here is a projected cost of $65,000. We share a regional facility, New Horizons, and we are going to see a projected increase in costs there of $122,000 because we know that we need to place additional students with disabilities in the New Horizons school. So it's not that New Horizons is increasing its cost to us, it's simply that we're adding more students into their programs. So our total cost increase for fiscal year 16 are $187,000. Now we are seeing some funding savings and also a little bit of increase in our budget. I mentioned on the previous slide that the VRS rate had decreased, so we were losing state funding. But as a result, our division now has to pay less into VRS, so we're saving over $50,000. What you see here is we've recouped the $26,000 that we've lost from the state and actually saved in additional funding. There were some categorical changes in state funding, so we were able to capture a little over $20,000 additional dollars. We're able to get some Medicaid revenue for specific students, and we're projecting an increase in that of $15,000. We know we have some retirements moving into next year, and we had some retirements late last year, as well as a group life rate decrease, so we're projecting a savings of $60,777. So you see here our total increase or savings is over $146,000. So when we add all this together, you see our total state revenue reduction, our cost increases, and then the savings and slight increase in funding we found in our budget. This means our budget shortfall is $87,329. But I haven't talked about compensation yet. Let's talk about that now. As you probably know, the state is providing a 1.5% salary increase, but this increase is for SOQ instructional support positions only. So these are only the SOQ positions that are recognized by the state. Remember I mentioned earlier, we are staffed beyond the SOQs as all school divisions are across the state because they are only the bare minimum. And in fact, there are some SOQs for which the state has never provided funding. School divisions actually have the option as to whether or not to provide this salary, and if they do, a local match is required. School divisions could provide this salary increase as late as January 1st of next year. And it's important to note that it's not provided for a full year for employees no matter when you give this salary increase. I want to remind everybody that our employees have received a total of only a 3% raise over the past 6 budget cycles. As I'm sure many of you are aware, local school divisions are recommending raises that are greater than 1.5% for their employees for next year. This is what the compensation increase looks like in actual dollar values. You see here, if we were to do a 1.5 increase for all of our employees, so again, employees beyond just the SOQ mandated employees by the state, it would cost us over $204,000. The state is providing only just over $90,000 as part of the raise that they have provided. I did want to note for everyone that the state is providing state employees, all of them, with a 2% raise. And again, here you see that all we're receiving from the state is $90,000, which doesn't even pay a full 1.5% increase for all of our employees. So in order to do a 1.5% increase, we need to find over $114,000. Now, if we do a 2.5% increase, you see our total is over $340,000. Again, all the state is providing us is just over $90,000. So our total needed is almost $251,000. So when we put these numbers in our budget, you see our total state revenue reduction, our cost increase, our fundings and savings, and that total for a 2.5% raise, $340,500, as well as just over $90,000 that we receive from the state. So adding a 2.5% raise for all of our employees creates a budget shortfall of only $337,623. This is how we will help to get us to cover that budget shortfall. I am proposing that we make additional personnel cuts. Note, these are on top of the 50.5 positions that we have already cut in the last 6 budget cycles. I am proposing we cut 1.5 teaching positions. One of these positions is tied to enrollment reduction in a specific program. It is not eliminating a program, it's just tied to the fact that we have fewer students in the program. It is important to note that we will need to shift positions between schools so that we match enrollment. If one school has more enrollment, we may need to shift teachers to cover that increase in enrollment in that particular school. We're also reducing support positions by 2.5. This is a bus driver position as well as paraeducator positions. All of these positions are being gained through attrition. So again, nobody in our school division is being laid off as a result of budget cuts. So you see here we get a total of over $197,000 in savings with those personnel cuts. We lay those personnel cuts against our budget shortfall, you see that we still need an additional $140,000. My budget request includes a request for $140,000 from our locality. If we were to receive the $140,000, it'll cover the full cost of a 2.5% raise for the entire year for all of our employees. I've been in constant communication with our city manager as we've developed our budget about this budget request, and am confident that he will include it in his budget that he takes to City Council in the coming weeks. If that request is funded by the City of Poquoson, it's very important to note that they will have provided us over $1.2 million in local funding over the past 6 budget cycles. Again, I want to say over $1.2 million. As I mentioned earlier, we've cut about $5 million out of our budget. Imagine if we had to cut an additional $1 million, how hard it would be for us, and certainly we would not be able to provide our employees with any additional compensation. We are very fortunate in the support that we've received from our city officials over the past 6 years and continue to receive from them as we move through another challenging budget year. So back to our budget development objectives, you can see we met them all. All instructional programs are maintained. We're not laying off any staff members due to budget cuts. and we are proposing increasing compensation by 2.5% for all employees. The next step in our budget process is to have a public hearing on March 26. The school board will likely vote to approve the budget that I have presented to them on that day. If they don't, we will hold another meeting on March 31st for that approval. Once the budget is approved, it will be forwarded to City Council by April 1st. As I finish my presentation, I just want to remind the community once again that due to our budget shortfall, we've had to cut $5 million out of our budget, and it included 50.5 positions. It's been a very challenging budget cycle for us in the last 6 years. And despite all that we've had to do, and the fact that there is increased revenue in the state, our state elected officials have not restored any of the funding that was reduced during the recession. Rather, they've just reduced our percentage of the funding that is available and given it to other parts of the state budget. You see here, in 1 year alone, we lost about $1 million to support our support staff. This was as a result of an arbitrary cap that was placed on us during the first year of the major budget reductions. Again, imagine if they would just change that and give that $1 million back to us to support our instructional programs. And while the state elected officials have not restored any of the funding that they've reduced for us over the past 6 years, they do continue to impose new mandates on us that we will have to implement. Finally, I just want to mention to everyone that next year is the year that we will get a new local composite index. This is created as a result of a formula and determines what our locality's ability to pay is for the schools. We're anticipating that our LCI will go up again for fiscal year 17. This means yet again we will receive less state funding. It's important to note that enrollment ties into the calculation of the local composite index. So if we could see an increase in enrollment in the coming years, it would even make a difference for us in that calculation and mean that we would get more state dollars. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to my budget presentation. Please do not hesitate to call me or email me if you have any questions.